It all began rather innocently, or at least as innocently as something like this ever can, with a package that never made it inside. The delivery confirmation email arrived while I was still at work, saying the box had been dropped off just after noon, but by the time we got home later that evening, it was nowhere to be found. Reviewing the footage later that night, I saw the delivery driver come up the walk and leave the box right on our porch. Then, about an hour later, a teenage boy in a gray hoodie walking up with no hesitation, scooping up the package, and walking away again as if it were his by right. At first, I didn't recognize the boy, but when I sent the clip around to a few nearby residents, casually, just asking if anyone had seen someone matching that description, one neighbor responded with a brief but pointed message, "Looks like Carl Jennings' son." Now, Carl Jennings was a name that carried some weight in our community, not because he was especially well-liked, but because he was one of those HOA board members who took his role as enforcer of suburban order very seriously. He attended meetings with a clipboard and a stack of printed-out bylaws, favored strong opinions about mulch colors, and had once made a lengthy speech about the dangers of non-uniform mailbox posts. I had had a few minor disagreements with him in the past, mostly about garden bed placement and paint sample approvals, but nothing worth recounting until now. Still, I did what I thought was the responsible thing. I sent the clip to the HOA office and asked that it be addressed appropriately. I didn't demand anything, nor did I circulate the footage beyond the small group of neighbors I'd initially consulted. I assumed the HOA would at least acknowledge the incident. Instead, what I received less than a week later was a formal violation notice, citing our use of unauthorized surveillance equipment and threatening a $500 fine, with the added note that failure to pay could result in lien proceedings against our home. The phrase unauthorized exterior surveillance devices was lifted directly from a section of the HOA handbook that I, admittedly, had never read thoroughly, but which I suspected had never been enforced until now. When I called the office for clarification, I was told, somewhat briskly, that the board had recently decided to enforce the camera policy more rigorously, and that all violations would be treated according to established penalty guidelines. I asked whether this sudden interest in enforcement had anything to do with the footage I'd submitted. The woman on the phone paused, then said only, "The timing is coincidental." A few days later, I received an unmarked envelope in our mailbox, no return address, no signature. Inside was a single sheet of printer paper, typed in a plain font. The note recommended that I remove the camera footage from the neighborhood message board, drop any formal complaint, and avoid unnecessary conflict for the sake of maintaining harmony in the community. It was, I gathered, meant to sound helpful and neighborly, but the tone was unmistakably threatening. At that point, I decided to pass the entire situation, video, violation notice, anonymous letter, to the local paper. They ran a small piece on it in the community column, framing the story carefully, a concerned resident fined for providing evidence of a theft, the perpetrator potentially related to a member of the very board imposing the penalty. It made a bit of a stir, not just online, but at the next board meeting, which was more well-attended than usual. The fine was dropped quietly the following week. There was no apology, no admission of error, simply a short email saying that upon review, enforcement action will not proceed at this time. Carl Jennings resigned from the board not long after, citing family matters. The cameras are still up. My daughter got a replacement gift, and she still talks about how the whole thing made her feel like a character in a detective show. As for me, I've learned a bit more about how power is protected in places like this with quiet policy enforcement and a careful paper trail. But I also learned that sometimes, just sometimes, people do pay attention when you shine a light, especially if you happen to catch it on camera.